Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new malicious compliance content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, Don't Walk on My Rocks. This story takes place one morning more than halfway through my Army basic training at Fort Bliss, El Paso, Texas. 50+ years later, some of the details are fuzzy or lost, but none that really matter to the retelling of this tale. At the time of this malicious compliance, I had taken something to the company office for a drill sergeant and was returning to the training area. There wasn't any grass in our company area. It was just too dry for grass. Instead, we had rocks about the size of quarters and half dollars where you would normally expect grass. And the D's had a rule. Keep off my rocks. But this particular day I didn't. I could have stayed on the concrete sidewalks, but I cut across the rocks, a distance of perhaps 30 feet rather than the 120 feet or so on the sidewalk. And it almost worked out just fine. Almost. About 10 feet before I was back on concrete, out rang, "Hold it right there, trainee." It was my company's top sergeant. After a brief discussion of my error, he told me to never walk on my rocks. Now drop and give me 20 push-ups. So I did, and he walked into the building as I counted each one. I had become pretty familiar with this process over the past weeks. Let's just say I had plenty of practice. When you finished the assigned push-ups, you didn't just pop back to your feet. You called out, "Permission to rise, drill sergeant," and waited for said permission. I thought about just getting up and going about my business. I knew he expected me to do just that because he went inside. But at this moment I realized it might be interesting to wait for a while in the front-leaning rest position, push-up position, right out in front of the company office. This began my malicious compliance. Perhaps a couple of minutes later an officer, I think our company commander, came walking down the sidewalk from the parking lot. He paused, and asked me what I was doing, so I told him. He said something like, "Okay," or, "I see," and continued inside the building. About 20 seconds later, the window nearest me shot up and Top stuck his head out saying, "You can get up, son. You can get up." From the way he called out, I'm pretty sure he had been a bit embarrassed. The palms of my hands were a little sore for a couple of days, but it was well worth it. Next one is titled, If You're Really Sick, Prove It. When I was 19 years old I used to work for a grocery store chain in the Southwest US. I was a baker. Meaning I had to wake up at like 12 a.m. to get to work and start baking, usually alone for about 4 to 5 hours until the rest of the crew popped in. We had recently had one of our managers, who we all liked, get transferred out from our store. She was replaced with a woman who was, for lack of better terms, a giant ducking witch. Micromanage, stare over your shoulder, check over your work, look at your clocking in, timing how fast you did something. Just an absolute nightmare. I had already been working there for 3 years without incident, and just within her first week there she wrote me up for taking 2 additional minutes on a break, which I actually got stuck helping a customer, but this didn't matter to her. We also had protocol that if you were sick, you had to get approval from your manager to leave your shift, and only if you had a replacement. This basically meant you pleaded with other coworkers to come take your shift. The issue is, as the baker, the only other person who could take my shift was, you guessed it, the manager. So on one fateful morning I come in and I can already tell something is wrong. I'm sluggish, my head hurts, and I feel so weak, not to mention I got a bad case of the cold sweats and my stomach is not feeling great. I'm about 2 hours into my bake. Really trying to just do anything without having to call my manager, but I knew there's no way I'm going to make it another 6 hours. So I call her and she picks up, "Don't tell me you're sick." I can tell she is sleepy and trying to get out of this. "Yeah, I'm really sorry, but I don't feel too good, can you take over?" I say, in a normal tone. Not some embellished sick tone. "You don't sound sick at all. You just sound tired. Get an energy drink and I'll see you when I come in," she says as her voice trails off as she is hanging up on me. So there I am, Sick as a ducking dog, with no backup and no way out. I'm 19. Don't want to lose my job. So I persevered, just going through the motions and doing a terrible job at baking. I just can't even focus, and now I have a terrible pain in my abdomen and I'm nauseous. Eventually my other baking staff comes in and they start commenting that I look like I'm dying. They try to help out, while I try to sit back and regain my energy. My manager strolls in a few hours later. Fully rested and ready to bust everyone's balls from the look of it, specifically mine. See, this is the type of commitment I want to see. This is how an adult works, she says, looking at me with a condescending look on her face. I'm fighting back every urge to tell this lady to duck off. Again, 19 years old, need the job. So I tell her I have to go because I'm feeling super sick. She says, "You don't seem sick. You got another 2 hours in your shift, you can make it." And me and my coworkers are just stunned. I tell her I really am sick. And by this time my body is just wanting to give out. She looks at me and says, "If you're really sick, prove it." Yeah, you know how this is going to go down. In what could be akin to some ridiculous vomiting scene in raunchy comedy took place. Every single muscle and cognitive control I had over my body was gone. Like someone turning on a fire hose. I discharged a stream of vomit all over my manager. We're talking full body coverage. She is visibly both appalled and upset, but she can't say anything lest she want my chunky discharge to seep into her mouth. She storms off, and I call my sister who works in the same plaza to take me to the hospital. I would arrive to find out that my appendix had ducking exploded, and I was lucky enough to get there when I did, or I could have died. Dying at a bakery of frozen goods. Not my thing at all. Many days later, after recovering, I show back up to work to find out that my manager was no longer at that location and had been moved to another store. So they told me, and that new protocols were being made about backup bakers and sick leave. It was one of the worst and best memories of my early job days, and I would go on to making sure if I was sick, I would not be at work to die in the future. Next one is titled, "Not Putting in Enough Hours, You Say?" I was reading some posts about employers judging employees based on idle time and such during COVID times, and it reminded me of this one at my last job. A few years ago I worked as a field engineer for a call recording company. I worked primarily with 911 agencies and would integrate recording systems with radio and phone systems to record the calls and radio traffic. If you've heard a 911 call on the news from one of a few states along the East Coast, there's a very good chance I built and installed that system. As part of our company's policy, we would do preventive maintenance every 6 months. This was where we went on site, tested everything was functioning properly, and showed some value in our maintenance contracts through FaceTime with the customers. After some years, I had climbed the ladder to being the lead engineer, installer, and trainer. I trained most of the other engineers and techs within the company along with performing my normal duties. I had also installed the vast majority of the systems I was doing maintenance on and was extremely familiar with them. A maintenance visit took me around an hour where it took the new guys 4 to 5 hours, and I would usually knock out 2 to 3 maintenance visits in a single day. I had literally triple the numbers as the next closest tech. As often happens, eventually the company was bought out. The new owner came in and presented himself as very metrics focused. The problem was that he didn't understand what we did in the field, so his metrics weren't always good ones. Eventually, I got written up and put on a performance improvement plan. The reason? Days I didn't have to drive far, I would finish 3 maintenance visits and still be home in less than 6 hours. Again, my actual performance metrics were legitimately triple the next closest tech, and most days I worked well over 8 hours when driving was included. But instead of looking at those metrics, he used time as his only metric and focused solely on the shortest days. And, unfortunately for me, I objectively worked less time than anyone else. Now for the malicious compliance. Instead of scheduling the way I had previously, I started scheduling to ensure I hit 8 hours a day, every day. Previously I had started at a customer site at 9 a.m. whether it was 1 hour away or 5, so would get up at whatever time that day required. I would also try to knock out multiple customers in the same area on the same trip to save driving time on longer days. Some days I would drive 12 hours total, knock out 3 maintenance visits taking another few hours, and have a total day of 15+ hours. Afterwards, I left for sites at exactly 8 a.m. and tried to get home at exactly 5 p.m. For those sites that were 5 hours away? Can't do them without a hotel room. Instead of costing a full tank of gas and a single day's wages for 3 clients, it now cost the company the same amount of gas, 3 to 4 nights in a hotel, and multiple days of my salary. For closer sites that I didn't need a hotel, I would make sure I didn't leave too soon to get home at exactly 5 p.m. so would sit in a server room playing games on my phone for a few hours. If sites were close enough, I would still try to knock out 2 or sometimes 3, but if time was the metric, I was going to make sure I worked as closely to 8 to 5 as possible without doing anything detrimental to a customer. Overall, I was trying to make a point to show that while I may have been meeting the time metric, I was actually doing less work by meeting that metric. We did employee reviews every quarter, so when my next review came around 3 months later, I tried to bring it up. Instead, the new owner praised me for working harder and ignored that I was doing significantly less work. During that meeting, I tried showing that it was costing the company more and I was achieving less by meeting that metric instead of an actual performance metric. But somehow, despite my spreadsheets showing costs, site visits, completed maintenance, and everything else, he refused to understand it. He kept praising how my work ethic had improved and didn't want me to change anything or go back. So I didn't change a thing and coasted at that job for the next few years. Next one is titled, "You don't get paid for 2 weeks, you quit, not fired." This happened in Tampa, Florida, decades ago, but you don't soon forget a burn like this. The boss at the starter and generator rebuilding shop let his nephew bring his personal car to the shop to work on it. Lots of power tools, hydraulics, solvents and flammable chemicals. Young, dumb and full of crap, he decided to clean out his gas tank, already removed and just inside the double doors, by sticking the Oxy Ace cutting torch in the gas filler tube of the gas tank. Gas tank became a rocket, left the floor, did a weird angular spiral down the warehouse-sized building, hit the end wall, then it was again hit the floor, the wall, ceiling and floor, ending up just about where it took off from. I complained to the boss, that this guy was just smart enough to be dangerous without meaning to and that I could not work in a place with someone like him. The boss, who reminded me of that joke about what do you have when you have 32 rednecks in a room, a full set of teeth, just grinned and said, "Well, sounds like you just quit." To which I replied, "Fine, give me my last paycheck and I am out of here." His grin got bigger. "I don't have to pay you until we do the payroll, which we do every 2 weeks, you were not fired, you quit. So you can just leave." Malicious compliance time. As I was walking out the door, I said over my shoulder, "Damn, now I have to go out and bum a quarter for the payphone so I can call OSHA and tell them why I had to quit." That grin vanished like a drop of sweat on a red-hot iron. "You go in the waiting room, and I will have the secretary cut you a check." So I did quit and leave, and I also called in a report to OSHA. Did you hear that OSHA and IDonT merged? It's known as OSH-ITT. My new handle is Karma Ranger, but I can't suss out how to change it yet. Cheers. Next one is titled, "I'll just puke all over the conveyor belt." When I was 19, 2014, I worked in a grocery store. I was a punctual employee and always picked up extra shifts. I was diligent and I left because of, well, stuff like this. Anyways, I'm working one day, go home, feel awful upon waking up and realized I had come down with something really nasty. I was checking people out this day. Still don't know what it was, but I had a fever and I had to work. I called a couple hours in advance to see if maybe I could take off, and my manager said something to the tune of, "We need you, you're essential to the operation." Whatever. I go in feeling like hell and I asked another manager, I was really dying at this point, if I could have a half day instead. He said, in a really snarky tone, if I had a doctor's note I could take the rest of the day off without jeopardizing my job. I didn't have insurance either. So I stayed. A couple other employees commented on how awful I looked and offered me water. Some said I looked like I was going to pass out. I went up to the shift manager for another water and we were pretty dead. She always copped a huge attitude with me and it never quite rubbed me the right way. I tell her it's empty and I really need to go home and they made me wear gloves, which pre-pandemic meant you might be sick and people aren't coming to my line because I look sick and like I'm trying not to pass out, and she goes, "People aren't coming to your line because you look miserable." Guess what? I am. Cue malicious compliance. A sweet woman comes down my line and I'm bagging her stuff and ringing it up. I immediately realize I need someone to take over now. The woman I was checking out said I looked green. Well, I can't walk off. So I puked all over the conveyor belt. It was a catastrophe. Sweet woman gets her groceries free of both charge and vomit. One of my managers had to go around replacing what she picked out. I went home and was told to take a day to recover. Last one is titled, "You Can Get One Car." Okay. My son had just turned 3 and had a visit to the dentist. I'd told him beforehand that if he listened to the dentist and was a good boy we would go to the Blue Store afterwards and get him a Hot Wheels car. They had a big bin of Hot Wheels for 99 cents each at the time. My son is a rock star. Opposite of his behavior at home most days, he was attentive, did everything the dentist asked and was the talk of the office when it came time to leave. I was so proud and excited to take him by Walmart on the way home for his prize. We get to the store and I reiterate, "Okay bud, go pick your favorite one and remember, you can get one car." "Okay daddy," and he makes his way to the bin. 5 minutes later this snozzberry comes up to me with 3 Hot Wheels packages. I laugh and tell him that the deal was for one car. He smiles the biggest shit-eating grin he can muster and puts each package down like a lawyer presenting the most damning of evidence. One car. One motorcycle. One spaceship. I was floored. My jaw hit the ground. I'd just been bamboozled by someone that refers to Bruce Banner's alter ego as Ma Hulk. We bought 3 Hot Wheels that day. Thanks for listening.